Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In a small town nestled in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, there existed a quiet familiarity. Pine trees lined the streets, their silhouettes casting long shadows as evening settled in. The townsfolk, a blend of generations, exchanged pleasantries at the corner cafe, while children played in the nearby park. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic existence, darkness lurked, its presence invisible, yet palpable. On a rainy evening in early March, that darkness would finally reveal itself. The rain fell steadily, transforming the streets into glistening rivers as headlights cut through the haze. It was around 8 p.m. when a high-pitched scream pierced through the air, fracturing the calm. A group of teenagers who had gathered for a bonfire at Green Lake turned to each other, their festive chatter dissolving into whispers of concern. Moments later, voices rose in panic as one of the teens, a girl named Lily, rushed from the tree line, her face drained of color. She stumbled upon a body, a situation that felt unfathomable. The shadows that once danced in the flickering firelight now swallowed the laughter whole. The town's police department was alerted, dispatching officers who arrived to find a scene that would haunt them for years. The lifeless figure of Jacob Allen, a well-regarded local high school teacher, lay sprawled near the shore, dressed in the attire of a weekend retreat. Around him, the soaked earth absorbed the reality of a life cut short. As the raindrops mixed with the chilling cries of the townsfolk, it was apparent. This was the moment the peaceful facade shattered, revealing a web of secrets, lies, and a quest for justice that had only just begun. The victim. Jacob Allen was a man of many layers, known for his warm smile and an unwavering passion for teaching. In the small town of Bramble Ridge, he had become a beloved figure at the local high school, where he had taught English for over a decade. His students often referred to him as Mr. A, a nickname that reflected the familiarity he cultivated in the classroom and amongst his peers. Jacob inspired his students with stories of literary heroes, often encouraging them to pursue their dreams, regardless of their circumstances. When the news of his death spread, shock reverberated through the community. Jacob had been more than just an educator. He was a mentor, a confidant, and a friend. He had a knack for making each student feel seen and valued, a quality that his colleagues admired. On a Friday evening, just days before his death, Jacob had joined his friends from university for a weekend camping trip at Green Lake. The group had not only escaped the pressures of adulthood, but also embraced the bond they had forged years ago, sharing stories of old and laughter that echoed into the night. Those who had witnessed Jacob in those moments spoke of his contagious joy, a reminder of the vibrancy he brought into their lives. But as the initial shock began to fade, whispers surfaced. Some alleged that Jacob had been under pressure, grappling with unpleasant secrets that could tarnish his reputation. Unfounded rumors and innuendos started to ripple through the school hallways, accusations lingering ominously in the air, suggesting he may have been involved in something sinister. As the investigation unfolded, those who knew Jacob faced the painful reality that the man they adored might have concealed facets of his life, darker than they could have ever imagined. In a town marked by trust and camaraderie, the unthinkable had stolen their hero, unraveling truths that may have been better left hidden. The crime scene. Upon arrival at Green Lake, Officer Mark Jenkins stepped out of his patrol car and was met by a chilling tableau. The blaring sirens faded into the night replaced by a thick, unsettling silence that hung heavily in the air, broken only by the sound of rainfall pattering against the leaves. He moved past illuminated flashlights and gathered officers, their faces illuminated by the harsh light, as they surrounded the crime scene. Jacob Allen lay sprawled on the muddy bank, a macabre reflection of the vibrant man he once was. His khaki camping jacket was drenched, clinging tightly to his torso, and the deep crimson stain on his shirt was stark against the saturated fabric. Officer Jenkins felt a knot tightening in his stomach, a knot that echoed the fear that rippled across the assembled crowd. Detective Carla Ramirez, a seasoned investigator known for her keen instincts, arrived soon after, her demeanor unyielding amidst the chaos. She approached the body, assessing the scene with a clinical eye. The surrounding area had been trampled by the feet of the fleeing teenagers, but despite the disturbance, several key details emerged. There, next to Jacob, lay a small notepad, its pages oddly pristine amid the muck. The small notebook bore a few hastily scrawled words, half-finished thoughts that did little to illuminate the circumstances of his death. Another detail caught Detective Ramirez's attention. Jacob's glasses, miles away from his lifeless body, lay fragmented beneath a low-hanging branch. This peculiar distance triggered the faint echo of a violent struggle that played out before the finality of death. The grim reality sank in for the officers present. This act was calculated, personal even. The positioning of the body, the disturbance of the surroundings, all hinted at an encounter that had turned deadly under the shadow of the towering pines. As the first drops of dew began collecting on the ground, the team initiated a thorough search of the periphery, gathering every piece of evidence they could find. A place where laughter once echoed had transformed into a stage for darkness. And with each moment, the urgency to unravel this mystery deepened. The questions loomed large. Who had wanted Jacob dead? And why had it come to this? The early investigation. With the dawn of a new day, the reality of Jacob Allen's murder cast a pall over Bramble Ridge. The local police station buzzed with activity. Officers shared grim reports, sifting through what little information they had. Detective Ramirez gathered her team in the small, cramped conference room. A whiteboard covered in hastily drawn connections stood as a testament to the urgency of their investigation. First on the agenda, she began, her voice steady yet commanding. We need to talk to those kids at the lake last night. They've seen something. A knock interrupted her, and Officer Jenkins stepped in, holding an evidence bag containing Jacob's notepad. Found this in the mud, along with his broken glasses, he said, placing it on the table. Looks like there might be something in here. The team gathered around as Ramirez carefully opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with quotes from T.S. Eliot, intertwined with random musings. However, one entry stood out with urgent Claridia notation about an upcoming parent-teacher meeting, laced with anxiety over a disagreement with an anonymous parent. The phrase, "I can't let them destroy what I built," stung with foreboding. That's a clue, Jenkins observed, brows furrowing. Could this be related to someone he had issues with at school? Meanwhile, Officer Nguyen scoured through Jacob's life, poring over records, hoping to illuminate any strained relationships. Amongst his digital archive, she discovered emails that painted a troubling picture. Complaints from parents regarding Jacob's teaching methods. There was one mother in particular, a constant presence in the school's affairs, Claire Reddick, known for her fierce protectiveness over her children's education. By the end of the day, the pieces were still jagged and incomplete, but a clearer picture was starting to emerge. Detective Ramirez felt the familiar rush of determination. Clues were elusive, but she sensed they were teetering on the brink of a breakthrough. and that would bring them closer to understanding who Jacob had wanted to protect, if only to keep himself alive. As the team prepared for the interviews ahead, the weight of their task settled heavily upon them. They were not just peeling back layers of a case. They were unearthing the life of a man who had unknowingly placed himself at the intersection of treachery and loyalty. The dead ends. The investigation took an unexpectedly stagnant turn. The initial interviews with the teenagers who had witnessed Jacob's death revealed muddled accounts, each story layered with shock and confusion. Some claimed to have seen shadows flit between the trees just before the scream, while others recounted vague figures that blended into the dark. No one could provide any concrete details, and the mystery deepened around Jacob's final moments. Detective Ramirez felt frustration creeping in as she sat at her cluttered desk, surrounded by incomplete leads. The response from Claire Reddick, Jacob's vocal critic, was dismissive. "He was a good teacher. We had our disagreements, but I would never wish him harm," she stated, her voice stony as she faced Ramirez in the school faculty lounge. Despite her efforts to glean insight from Claire, the slate of parental complaints hadn't yielded any solid leads. It only intensified the question: was there more beneath the surface of that friendly exterior? While Claire maintained her innocence, other parents expressed disdain toward Jacob's unconventional teaching style. Yet, none of them seemed to harbor enough animosity to resort to murder. Simultaneously, detectives followed up on Jacob's personal relationships. Close friends were questioned, but they painted him as an upstanding individual, devoid of enemies. Even the closest confidants were largely clueless, producing only whispered speculations about his thoughts and worries regarding his job. As the weeks rolled by, Officer Jenkins found himself sifting through what felt like an endless pile of Jacob's teaching materials. There, hidden amongst lesson plans and student essays, an item caught his eye: an old photograph of a group from a literary retreat, where Jacob had faced off against Claire in a debate. They both wore expressions of fierce passion, Jacob confident, Claire fiercely determined. The image triggered questions within Jenkins' mind. What had transpired during that retreat? No matter how many theories surfaced, the trail turned cold with each new discovery. Every avenue traveled brought them to yet another brick wall, leaving the bottom of the detective's gut twisted with uncertainty. Frustrated but undeterred, they prepared for the next round of interviews, knowing that the truth had to be out there, lurking silently, waiting to be uncovered. Time was slipping away, but hopes of finding answers remained alive, carried on the fragile wings of determination as they pressed into the unknown. A break in the case. Weeks slipped by as the investigation remained tangled in a web of uncertainties and dead ends. In the quiet of the police station, new information trickled in sporadically: a witness emerging here, an anonymous tip there, but none proved substantial. Yet, the detectives held on to the thin thread of hope that something would give way. Then, one chilly morning, a phone call would shift the entire course of their efforts. Officer Jenkins answered, his brow furrowing as the voice on the other end introduced themselves as a local barkeeper from the neighboring town of Cedar Falls. She was nervous but insistent, claiming to have overheard something disturbing in the days leading up to Jacob's murder. "Two men came in a few nights before you found him," the barkeep explained. "They were talking about an issue with some teacher, mentioning his name. It sounded heated, like they wanted to confront him." Ramirez's heart raced as Jenkins scribbled down notes. "Can you remember anything specific they said?" The one guy kept saying something about setting things right, and they laughed, but it felt menacing. "They were drinking pretty heavily," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now I can't shake it." Equipped with this tantalizing lead, The detectives wasted no time in tracking down the men, identified only by their first names shared during the bar conversation mark. And Dave. Days of following up their last known whereabouts produced a trail leading to a busy construction site on the town's fringes. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the trailer office, Mark Lee, a longtime resident with a reputation for barroom brawls, reluctantly faced questioning. "We were just blowing off steam," he grunted, squirming under the scrutiny of Ramirez's gaze. But just as hopes of solidifying a lead faltered, a faint flicker of recognition struck Ramirez as she recalled the name Claire. Reddick had dropped. Mark's sister was in the same circles, advocating for educational reform, constantly at odds with Jacob. As bits began falling into place, tension and urgency surged within the team. Was this reckless banter at the bar veiling an even darker reality? With renewed vigor, they prepared for another round of intense interrogations, determined to elucidate the murky corners of this case, to chase the shadows inching ever closer to the truth. The suspect. The sharp click of a pen echoed against the stark walls of the interrogation room as Detective Ramirez paced, mulling over the fragments of the story that had begun to take shape. He was more hopeful now. Mark Lee was not just another name, but potentially a key to unlocking this mystery. As the clock ticked away, she knew that time was of the essence. Every passing moment allowed the truth to sink further into the depths. In the adjoining room, Mark sat hunched over, fidgeting nervously as Officer Jenkins presided over him. His brash persona was crumbling under the weight of accusations and his bravado of fault. The atmosphere was thick with unease as Jenkins leaned in closer. "You're in a situation now that's grave," he said, the gravity of his tone sinking in. "You say you were just blowing off steam. But how do you explain those conversations about Jacob Allen? What did you want to set right?" Mark's stone wall began to crack. "Few did anything by it," he stuttered. He was just a teacher. "Just a guy who rubbed some folks the wrong way." Ramirez entered the room, her presence commanding. "Mark, you had a heated discussion over drinks. That means something. You have a temper. Tell us, what does setting things right mean? Did you confront Jacob that night?" A silence dragged through the air, heavy with the unspoken. Mark fidgeted in before dropping his gaze, mumbling just above a whisper. "We only wanted to scare him a bit. He messed with my sister, and we thought that if you intimidated him, he'd back off." Ramirez interjected, her voice steady, yet filled with heat. "Did it ever cross your mind that things could go too far? That you might hurt him?" Mark's defensiveness crumbled as he glanced up, fear flooding his expression. "No, we'd never So there's someone else," Jenkins interjected, capturing the shift. "Who was with you?" Refusing to meet their gaze any longer, Mark's complexion turned pale. He was slipping as silence spoke of ownership to something larger than himself, a fear of implicating an accomplice. As the air thickened with the weight of their questions, Ramirez felt a palpable breakthrough swell. They were close, unearthing layers of a plot born from emotional blackmail. The outline of confrontation loomed ominously over the case, and the foundation shifted beneath them, propelling them forward to uncover not just who harmed Jacob, but why a teacher's life would come to such a tragic end at the hands of those who should have known better. The answers were elusive, but now they were within reach. The trial. The courtroom echoed with a hushed anticipation as the community of Bramble Ridge filled the wooden benches, each face reflecting the myriad of emotions that had unfolded over the months since Jacob Allen's death. The air was thick with tension, a palpable energy that could easily be cut with a knife. This was not just a trial, but a reckoning, a confrontation between justice and the shadows of doubt that had lingered since that fateful night. Mark Lee sat at the defendant's table, his eyes darting nervously between the jury and his attorney, a polished figure who seemed far too composed for the gravity of the situation. Across the aisle, Claire Reddick and her family sat together, a facade of strength masking their suffering. Whispers of outrage wafted through the room. Accusations of Jacob's supposed indiscretions, lingering like the unsteady scent of smoke after a fire. As the proceedings commenced, the prosecutor laid out the case with clarity, recounting the events that led to Jacob's tragic demise. Each word was steeped in pain, painting a picture of a beloved teacher brought low by the mere act of standing up for his students. Witness testimonies detailed the lead-up to the confrontation that night, with the barkeeper's chilling account being a cornerstone of the prosecution's narrative. Mark's presence, once menacing, now appeared frail in the light of day. Witness after witness painted a portrait of Jacob as a man who stood tall for what he believed in, even against resentment. The prosecution's aim was to show that a confluence of animosity and fear, stiffened by familial loyalty, had driven Mark and his accomplice to commit an irreparable sin. As the defense took their turn, they painted Mark not as a calculated murderer, but as a misguided young man caught in a whirlwind of emotion someone, seeking to protect family honor. Pushed to the edge by a belief that had turned toxic, the intensity in the courtroom swirled as they sought to dismantle the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that perhaps this was a tragic accident, nothing more than a misguided attempt at intimidation that had spiraled out of control. But as the trial progressed, it became apparent. Community sentiment hung heavily on the scales of justice. Jurors glanced toward Jacob's family, their faces etched with grief and disbelief, and it was clear which side truth appeared to reside upon. Closing arguments reverberated through the room, drawing in every soul present. The prosecutor's voice rose, final and unwavering. Inaction in the face of fear may be an acceptable response to life's pressures. But what we witnessed that night was far beyond that. It was violence at its core. As the judge dismissed the jury for deliberation and the weight of uncertainty hung in the air, even the gavel's echo felt laden with history. This trial would define more than just individual guilt. It would reverberate through a town grappling with the betrayal of trust and the shadows of their own making. Every person in that courtroom held their breath, each heartbeat echoing the question, would justice be served? Or would the truth remain a harbinger of shadow? The aftermath. The verdict arrived with a suffocating tension that settled heavily in the courtroom, as if the air had thickened under the weight of collective hope and despair. Jurors filed in, their expressions inscrutable against the barrage of anxious glances from the audience. As the foreman rose, every face tilted toward him, held captive by a shared anxiety. On the charge of manslaughter, he began, his voice steady. We find the defendant, Mark Lee, guilty. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room, followed by an audible murmur. Claire Reddick squeezed her husband's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face for the loss of Jacob, now solidified by this reaffirmation of injustice. While the community had awaited justice, the gravity of their reality set in. Even with a verdict, the scars would never fully heal. In the weeks that followed, the streets of Bramble Ridge transformed. Mourning transformed into cautious resilience as Jacob's family sought to honor his memory. A memorial was set up at the town's entrance, adorned with flowers and hand-painted signs that read, "Teaching lives forever remembered." It became a sanctuary for students and townsfolk alike, a monument to the man who had inspired countless young minds. As for Mark, the prison sentence served as both a punishment and a catalyst for self-reflection. Behind bars, he confronted the reality of his actions, the weight of loss pressing down upon him as he grappled with the consequences of misplaced loyalty and reckless behavior. Each day felt like a battle against regret, as he learned not only the gravity of his mistake, but also how quickly a life could unravel. Detective Ramirez, who had poured her heart into the case, remained at the forefront, her commitment unwavering as she began visiting schools to talk to students about the importance of understanding consequences, decisions, and empathy. The darkness that had enveloped Bramble Ridge still hung in the air, but she saw glimmers of light and hope emerging from the shadows. As seasons shifted, so too did the sentiment in the town. Conversations that once centered around fear transformed into discussions of support, healing, and community rebuilding. Everyone, from parents to students, engaged in new initiatives focused on mental health and open dialogue, intertwined with honoring Jacob's legacy. Forever changed by the painful chapters of loss and regret, the town emerged with resilience, learning to navigate the bittersweet balance of life after tragedy. The scars would always remain, yet in their shared grief, they found a renewed commitment to understanding, to compassion, and ultimately to protecting each other in a way that they had once failed to do for Jacob Allen. Reflection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town of Bramble Ridge, a sense of profound change permeated the air. In the aftermath of Jacob's murder and the trial, those who remained felt the lingering weight of unanswered questions and unhealed wounds. Yet, there was something remarkable taking shape here, collective understanding that their lives had been irrevocably intertwined by this tragedy. Detective Ramirez often returned to the memorial by the lake, reflecting on how easily harmony could shift into chaos. She thought about the layers of human nature and emotions that had bubbled beneath the surface, exposing vulnerabilities and fears that, when left unchecked, could lead to devastation. In the conversations she held with students, she emphasized the importance of empathy, resilience, and the courage to speak out against injustices, no matter how small. Clarity became a symbol of healing, speaking at local events, advocating for mental health, and clearer communication within families. She transformed her sorrow into action, determined to create a legacy that honored her late husband, ensuring that other young lives would not fall victim to unaddressed grievances. As the seasons changed, so did the community's narrative. It was no longer just a story of loss, but one of rebirth, community strength, and the realization that confronting uncomfortable truths could lead to profound growth. While Jacob's absence remained palpable, his love for learning echoed through the lives he had touched. His memory solidified in the hearts of those who carried forward the lessons he instilled. In the face of despair, Bramble Ridge recognized its capacity for resilience, ultimately transformed by the darkness that had once threatened to swallow them whole. This reflection, both painful and uplifting, carried the promise of a path forward on, defined by unity, understanding, and an abiding commitment to protecting one another as they navigated the complexities of life together.